Welcome to the West Ham Voice on Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining me. This is a brief update to give you news on the latest injuries that we've had. International break hasn't been favourable for us, has it? Not in the slightest. You know, we've had one injury after another. And of course, the latest one that we heard about was that Mohammed Kudus might have been injured and maybe out of the game against Burnley this coming weekend. Well, the good news is that Kudus was actually named on the bench for Ghana against Comoros in their World Cup qualifying game. That's actually happening at the moment. There's 70 minutes gone and Comoros are leading 1-0. Now, Kudus was on the bench in the first half. Comoros took the lead on the 43rd minute to go 1-0 up. And in the second half, Kudus was introduced as a replacement for Andre Ayew, which ironically, the ex-West Ham player, he was the stand-in for Kudus, but now they swapped and Ayew is off and Kudus is on. So that's good news. And after 70 minutes, Kudus quite hasn't made his mark yet for the Ghanaian team, but I guess for West Ham United, I know we're selfish, but I guess for West Ham United, it's good news that he's playing. Despite not training on Monday, it's good news that he's back playing for Ghana, which means it should be absolutely okay for the game against Burnley this coming weekend. Whilst I'll be watching the score whilst I'm doing the rest of the updates for you. And the other update, of course, is Michail Antonio. Now, we heard that Michail Antonio, when he got injured, he was going to be out for 3 months. He was going to be out for 9 months. He was going to be out for the rest of the season. You know, it might even be a game changer for him, and it might be the end of his career with this knee injury. Well, not so. From what we understand, the latest news is that Antonio's going to probably be out for something like 3 or 4 weeks. Now, he will inevitably miss the game against Burnley this coming Saturday. Quite possibly miss the game against TSC as well. And if he is out for 3 or 4 weeks, he'll also miss the game against Palace at home. He'll miss the away game against Spurs and against Fulham. And he will also probably miss the last Europa League group stage game against Freiburg at home. Maybe if it's a month, he may be back in time for the Wolves game at home, quite possibly. But it's more likely, if there's nothing else really serious, it's more likely he'll be returning for the crucial games, the League Cup game against Liverpool on the 20th away on the 20th of December, the 23rd of December against Man United at home in the league, and also the Arsenal game on the 28th of December again in the league. So look, he could miss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly 7 games anyway, but at least he's not going to miss the whole season. Now, I know people have been talking about maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Even I said it, to be quite honest with you. But this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because if he is back within a month, it's just before the January transfer window, will David Moyes then decide it's okay, Antonio's back? You know, we won't get a replacement for him or like at least a loan signing up front and so on. Or will he say, actually, I don't want to risk this again. Antonio has demonstrated that, so, you know, if he's injured, we're going to be left short. Maybe I should get a player in. So it's going to be really interesting if Antonio is back by before the end of December, what David Moyes will decide to do and Tim Steidten decide to do in the January transfer window. Will they get a backup, or will they go with what they've got? Or will they go with the other players that we've got, and maybe even the youngster, Divin Mbama? Right, Jarrod Bowen. Well, as we know, he was sent home from England duty on Sunday because of a knee problem, a knee injury. Now, from what we understand, there's a bit of fluid on his knee. It's a bit swollen, but there's nothing really serious as first thought. Now, if it's a fluid on his knee, if you remember, Sebastien Haller had the same issue when he was playing for us in 2019-2020 season, and he had a small procedure on his knee called an arthroscopy, where you kind of pierce the knee and you drain the fluid out, and then you need a small amount of time for recuperation. And back then, Haller had something like 12 days off, and he missed one game and then was back in action for us. Now, if this is what Bowen has got, then it's quite possible that he may have to have the same procedure. And if he does have that, then he'll be out of action for maybe 10, 11, 12 games, 10, 11, 12 days, and then recuperate. So long as they don't find any other issue with Jarrod Bowen's knee, of course. Now, if he does, it depends on when he might have to have that procedure. From what we understand, he's likely to have quite another check on his knee before the weekend game. But the longer you leave it, then the more likely it is that he will miss even more games. So if he has this procedure, say in the next day or two, then he may only miss the next 2 games, Burnley and TSC, and be available for the Crystal Palace game. If that procedure is held back, and then we realize that he's got to go ahead with it anyway, there's a possibility that his 10-12 day recuperation might mean he misses not only Burnley and TSC, but also the Crystal Palace game as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Jarrod Bowen, and whether this West Ham decide that they do need to have this arthroscopy, and if so, when. And that will determine how many games he might miss. Other injuries. Now, we all saw Thomas Soucek with a massive gash on his forehead because a player decided to kick him and the ball at the same time in the international game that he played the other day. Well, Soucek was actually back in action for the Czech Republic on Monday, and even scored a goal as well. He scored the 3rd goal in a 3-0 win. I think it was against Moldova. So it looks like Thomas Soucek is going to be absolutely fine, and he will be available for the game against Burnley this weekend. Other players, Michail Antonio, there was a concern about him and concussion, etc., when he went into with the Moroccan squad. But it looks like, I mean, the Moroccan game last week was actually postponed. It was cancelled. So we didn't know whether he'd be available or not. Now, from what I understand, Morocco's playing tonight. I don't know who they're playing because Sky Sports and BBC websites tell you two completely different things. But my understanding is Morocco will be playing today, and it will remain to be seen whether Aguerd is going to be in action or not. Now, from what we understand, he's had enough recuperation time. I think it's a 10-day recuperation for a knock on the head. So we believe that he should be okay for the game against Burnley anyway this coming weekend. If he isn't, we've got Mavropanos and we've got Zuma back. We've got other options as well to cover for him. And the only other player I guess we need to speak about is Vladimir Coufal. Not injured, but sent home because he decided to go clubbing in between Europa qualifiers. I don't know what got into him, but there you go. Now, all right, he was punished by the Czech Republic by being sent home, but it will remain to be seen whether David Moyes decides to punish the player as well on domestic duty. So we'll see what happens there. It'll be quite interesting. What do I think? I think maybe Moyes will go, naughty boy, don't do it again, but you're in the team for Saturday anyway. So just as a recap, Mohammed Kudus, the back injury that we were concerned about, he's actually in action at the moment. There are 78 minutes gone. Comoros is still leading 1-0 against Ghana. So he's playing. So we expect him to be absolutely fine, so long as he doesn't aggravate his back in any way. We expect him to be absolutely fine for the game against Burnley this coming weekend. Antonio, not as bad as we thought. He still could miss about half a dozen games or so for West Ham, being out for about a month. But we expect him to be back maybe for the Wolves game or possibly for the Liverpool League Cup game in December. Jarrod Bowen, like I said, dependent on what needs to happen, he's going to have checks and fitness tests, etc., for West Ham to determine whether he needs this small procedure on his knee called an arthroscopy in order to take out the fluid. Dependent on when they decide to do that, if they decide that he needs that, will determine how many games he might miss. Looks like he might miss the Burnley game, but a late fitness test will determine whether that happens or not. And if they do have the procedure, he could miss 2, maybe even 3 games, which would include Burnley, TSC, and Crystal Palace at home. Other than that, that's a brief update. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. I'll give you another update as it happens, whenever other news comes up. And I'll see you all very soon.